How you doing, Cali Crowd? This channel was built to show that anybody with enough perseverance can use calisthenics and bodyweight training to learn fantastic skills, all while burning fat, building muscle, and having more fun with fitness. But today we're taking a step back from all of that and reviewing a book. It's Smart Bodyweight Training by Schifferle from the Red Delta Project. Let's get into it. I have used books to support me on my calisthenics journey, and I occasionally review ones that I feel add significant value. As with previous reviews that I've done on this channel, I have to respect that this is somebody else's work and they put a lot of time and effort into creating this book. So I can't divulge everything inside of it, but I'm going to break this book review up into 3 parts: a summary, pros and cons on the book, and then who I think this book is for, who should be reading it. Let's jump straight into the summary. Calling this book Smart Bodyweight Training is actually a little bit of a misnomer, because the principles actually in this book can be applied to training in general. Essentially, what we have here is a book that sums up all the elements that will make your training great again. This is done by taking us through what actually gets our bodies fired up to build muscle and get stronger, progressions and progressive overload that aren't simplistically linear, but well-rounded and cognizant of all the levers that we can pull to tell our bodies that we want it to grow, and various movement cohorts that Smart Bodyweight Training dubs chains, and how we can use these chains to build our own comprehensive programs. Ultimately, think of this as a companion guide on how to optimize your training once you already have a really good idea of what your training goals are. Jumping straight into the pros and cons now, and I'll start with the negatives, because one thing actually stands out to me as being a little bit less than ideal, and we'll get into that in a second, but I have a smaller negative point to mention first, with downside number 1, which is that it's self-published. Now, when I've spoken about books on this channel before, I've mentioned about how they're the most refined pieces of media on the planet. And this is largely because of the publication process. So when I see that a book is self-published, as I believe this has been, I immediately get a little bit more critical of it, because it may not have gone through the scrupulous editing process as some other books may have to have gone through. Now, could this just be me being old-fashioned? Probably. Getting published in the traditional sense, where you go hat in hand to a publisher, is extremely expensive. Not to mention that your message could be a little bit distorted because too many editors have got their hands over your work. Does this mean I discount everything in this book? Of course not. I have a lot of time for the content that Matt at the Red Delta Project puts out, which is why I subscribe to the message he delivers. I just think that we should think critically of all forms of media, whether it's a self-published book or somebody sat in his dining room recording a video on YouTube. The second downside, and this was a big one for me personally, is the lack of focus it places on calisthenics skills. Now, when you say bodyweight training, not everybody thinks about calisthenics skills. I myself have gone on record on this channel by saying too many calisthenics athletes that I see in the world over-index on their focus on skill work. Smart Bodyweight Training does a great job at informing the reader about how to use their body to really build strength in ways that the book describes as the unfair advantage of bodyweight training. Essentially, what this is alluding to is that the way in which calisthenics forces you to think about how you move your body and how you create tension makes you far more better equipped to build muscle, burn fat, and get stronger. It is then a missed opportunity, at least in my eyes, to not show how skills such as the L-sit, front lever, and handstand build significant tension, all while developing really fun motor patterns. There are a few items in the book that highlight a few calisthenic skills such as front levers and human flags, but it reads like an afterthought and certainly isn't detailed enough for you to learn how to do them just by reading this. It's for that reason then that if you're looking for a book that pumps you up about calisthenic skills, then this is not that book. Now, am I presuming that everyone that starts body training should learn how to handstand or front lever? Of course not. But through calisthenics, we have access to a realm of fitness that you only really see in sports, and that is skill acquisition. This area of fitness really shouldn't be undersold, and I really think the book misses a trick here. Okay, so negatives out of the way, let's move on to the positives, and the first pro, which is the focus on movement patterns over skills. Okay, so I just mentioned that skills were undersold in this book. So what am I talking about? Smart Bodyweight Training spends 111 pages discussing chain training, an idea that essentially capitalizes on moving with purpose, that purpose being creating deliberate tension. I often talk on this channel about how skills are really important but are often overhyped, and that by focusing on quality movement and your body's longevity first, learning the skills will actually become far easier. Matt, in his writing style of this book, seems to follow the same underlying principles through these 6 muscle chains and how defining and developing them can make you a better athlete. The second positive of the book is that it's very conversational. Smart Bodyweight Training has a writing style that makes you feel like you're watching a YouTube video or reading a podcast. It's full of anecdotes, metaphors, and leading questions that make you feel like you're having a conversation with the writer. This is something that generally fitness books really don't do very well, because they're either too full of jargon or too busy trying to prove this point that they made 3 sentences ago. This is beneficial because instead of spending time trying to figure out what exactly you just read, you can spend time really processing it and figuring out how what you just read can be applied to your situation. For example, the book talks about how what you think about while training ultimately dictates how much tension you can create in your body. The book then asks you, what do you think about when you're training? Where the usual answer is you list out what you're working on. But this literally got me thinking, what do I think about when I'm training? Am I just going through the motions, or is every fiber of my being really focused on pushing or pulling as hard as I can? Ironically, it's this sort of conversational style that would have probably been ripped out if this had gone through the traditional publication process that I actually mentioned was a disadvantage earlier. The next positive about this book was the amount of myths busted in this book. Because of the scope of bodyweight training and the various ways in which it can be used to gain very different results, there are a lot of myths about it. Smart Bodyweight Training does a really great job at breaking down those dogmatic myths that could really hold us back. You can build muscle, you can burn fat, you can get stronger, all through bodyweight training, as long as you are adhering to the principles of quality time under tension and progressive overload, and are willing to think with technical mastery about what you are doing while you train. The next positive we have is the DIY element of the book. This channel is all about empowering people to take fitness into their own hands and showing that you do not need to pay somebody astronomical sums of money to get fit and healthy. It should be a surprise to nobody then that one of the main things I like in the book is the onus it places onto readers to do exactly that by showing people how to build their own training programs, right down to even creating your own training equipment. And finally, we have a really big positive for me, which is a mindset element of this book. Mindset is probably the most underrated benefit of bodyweight training, and quite frankly, too many fitness books just really just skip past it. Pursuing health goals would improve the psyche of a person, but bodyweight training drastically amplifies this. For example, doing bicep curls on autopilot is not too uncommon, but most people would be really hard pressed to do pull-ups without really thinking about what they're doing, which will add a multitude of psychological benefits to your training results. Smart Bodyweight Training is the first fitness book that I have read, at least, that seems to really acknowledge areas like plateaus, progression, and health from a mindset perspective, not simply by looking at your latest PB or how well you're getting along in your fitness journey. By accepting that training is all part of a process, a journey, we give ourselves the freedom to explore different ways in how to push ourselves forward. On to who should read this now, and in short, anybody looking to gain muscle or build strength would gain a lot of value from this book. Calisthenics focused or not. But what I will say is that different people might find it more beneficial to read at different points in their fitness journey based on what their goals are. For example, somebody new to fitness could really use the items in this book to understand whether bodyweight training is an avenue that they really want to go down. Somebody who has a history of weight training but perhaps would rather not use a gym would find a lot of value from the ideas in this book about how to get the most out of leaving the weight room behind without losing any of their hard-earned gains. And maybe for somebody pursuing skills, I personally would still suggest that they try things out for themselves first, but the ideas here will very much complement the sort of things that you will find out once you have attempted to learn to front lever, for example. All in all, I think this is a top read. It definitely will be making the bookshelf. I enjoyed it very much, and I'll be applying a lot of the principles from this book into my own programming. I'll leave a link in the description below so that you can get a copy if you want. But I want to know what your thoughts are. Have you read this book before? Have you seen any of Matt's other work? Are there any other calisthenics books that you would like me to review on this channel? Drop me a comment down below and I'll see you in the next one.